Hello, and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast, whereby we are reshaping life, leadership, and business from the inside out and talk about 6 degrees of separation. I've just worked out and I'm welcoming to the show George Siosi Samuels. Firstly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Hey, thank you. And I just worked out that you are an Australian citizen and you lived in Melbourne. And so you didn't live
Yeah,
far away from me and you lived in Melbourne for like 12 years or something, you said.
yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And here you are. You've just moved to Thailand from Mexico after living in
Yep,
Mexico for 5 years.
yep,
But you've also lived next door to me in a way, like not too far
yep.
away suburb wise. So there you go.
Yeah, small world, right?
Such a small world, George. It's such a small world. And we're going to have quite the conscious chat today, I think. Like,
Looking
we've just
forward to
been
it.
talking for like, I don't know, 13 or 14 minutes. I keep getting into these situations where doing the pod and we get connected at the start pre-show and like
Yeah,
stop we've got to stop talking here, we've got to go into the interview because we start getting into these deep conversations but let's get into it. So
let's do it.
let's start with that you are a founder of FAIA, which is Future Artificial Intelligence Alliance, and whereby you work at the intersection of emerging technology, global collaboration, long horizon thinking. And I forgot to ask you how long you've had the business for. How long have you had that for?
Yeah, since late 2018.
Okay.
So set up in Singapore and have had a few companies since then. And this one I just keep almost like a holding company in the background. And yeah, there's a story behind the name too, but we can talk about that
Oh,
after.
yeah, well, I'll definitely, I won't forget that.
Yeah,
The other one I love though, and the name of this one, and I'm not suggesting that, the name isn't great for the one we've just talked about, but you are the
yeah,
founder also of Conscious Stack Design. Anyone who has conscious in their business name, I love it because
yeah,
it is a sign of the new world. And
yes.
the word conscious has been around for a very long time, but it's such a pivotal moment in time where we all need to be more conscious. And I know you're going to talk about that. And essentially, Conscious Stack Design is a design diagnostic systems that reveal how technology, incentives, culture, and human attention interact and where they silently break down. Think of it as digital feng shui. And when I saw this on your LinkedIn profile, I was like, love that. For
Yeah,
AI stacks and organizations where you arrange tools, agents, and workflows so they support human cognition instead of eroding it. And you
yeah,
basically said, B, it's just protecting our human mind. And boy, do we need to
yes.
be protecting that at the moment.
Yep.
Whew, we're just completely 24/7 switched on. You don't chase hypes from by the sounds of things. You're a global connector and a technologist, and you put that macro lens to AI, geopolitics, organizational design, asking not just what can we build, but how should we build it? And at the core of your philosophy, it's future systems must be designed with alignment first, scale second. And then you started like blowing my mind in terms of we were talking about productivity and you said
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
need to move from productivity to coherence, but I am going to stop there. I'm going to let you
Okay.
share your
No, love
share
it. You're
your
doing
journey.
well.
You can go whichever way you like and then I'll be asking you
Yeah,
questions.
sure. Let's maybe just start off where you left off about the productivity and coherence, and then we can weave in, the story background, right? I think what we started talking about was, yeah, productivity and coherence. And the reason why I use coherence a lot more is because it is similar to alignment, but slightly different. But around 1911 is kind of when the productivity obsession really started to surge. And, this was in alignment with the industrial era. And back then, time was slow enough that we could actually mechanize everything and treat human beings as mechanistic parts, right? Components. So I think what's super fascinating about the things we create often is a reflection of the collective consciousness of that time too, right? So if we look at the industrial era, the way that we were building the war times, right, that were coming out, we started to treat people in the same way, right? But over time, that productivity obsession didn't really get disrupted by anything else. So we kept those same sort of output measurements for productivity. And but we transferred that into knowledge workers, right? So you notice how we still treat ourselves today is very much around outputs, ROI,
Mm.
KPIs, very mechanistic. The problem is that works when the time is slow enough for us to be able to measure in that manner. What AI is doing is that it has accelerated time or our perception of time to such a point that those sort of productivity measurements are no longer relevant because AI is doing all the things that we used to measure ourselves by, our success, our worth, everything. And so if you lit up to feng shui, then I'm sure you're familiar with the Chinese astrology system, right?
Oh,
We've just
yeah.
moved in. We've just moved in, right, to the Chinese year of the fire horse. And I think in the West, I'm often really fascinated by East to Western thinking, North South, just kind of connecting opposites. And in the West, I think there was a lot of Instagram posts and content coming out about how the year of the fire horse is coming out. We're going to have to move fast and essentially take on those characteristics of the horse. But I think there was one woman who shared something that was really important, and she articulated what I was thinking but couldn't articulate. And she said, "We aren't necessarily the horse. The energy of the year is the horse that's moving fast. We are the riders, and so that means that we cannot keep up with the pace of the horse. So all we have to do is learn how to stay still and stable and coherent on it." And that is actually really hard for us to do, right? Because we think if you look at the way that we measure again productivity, we're trying to keep up with AI, we're trying to learn everything, keep up with the latest and the greatest, but we cannot. And there's something here that actually relates to physics, which is we are carbon based beings trying to keep up with the silicon in the machine, right? And if you look at the atomic elements, we're carbon, so that's 6, and silicon is all the way up at 14. And we've been trying to keep up with silicon ever since Silicon Valley came out. And what it has proven is that even though we've had computers and machines for a while, right? We haven't actually been able to keep up, but those who have learned to leverage have, right? As we know, the widening gap between the rich and the poor. But even the knowledgeable now are finding it hard to keep up too, right? So a lot of my professional friends, really smart folks, the wealthy, they can't even keep up with AI. They are having a cognitive collapse
Oh, I
because of
haven't
the
heard
speed.
the term cognitive collapse. Oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah.
I had one a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I've got like ever since that, I've got a
Yeah.
short fuse, so it just goes on
Exactly.
before it even gets to collapse because it just happens. Like, yeah, that's a great
Ex-
term. Sorry, it's not a great term, but
yeah.
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think the way that I see it and, conscious stack design is sort of like a culmination of the last 15 years of me working in essentially digital transformation, but through different roles. And one of my monikers is as a digital wayfinder, right? Taking my Polynesian ancestry, my experience as a technologist, and a combination of the two. So often people will refer to me as the digital wayfinder because I'm always finding a way to ride each digital wave throughout my entire career. And I've always been able to navigate it pretty well and fast. But I have seen the difference with this wave, with this digital wave, because it's fundamentally a consciousness leap, right? It's no longer just about productivity improvement, right? Which is kind of how we measured each new tech wave. This is literally a quantum leap, which, a lot of people use that term, but I think it's the most fitting because it is a significant step leap from where we've been. And so yeah, sorry.
Sorry, George. I have quite a few questions, and I just want
No,
to
go for it. Go for
before you go
it.
too far ahead.
Yeah,
There's a couple of things I just want to pull out of more of
please.
you in
Yeah.
terms of you just said it's a quantum leap.
Mm.
And is this in terms of when you say quantum leap, in layman's terms for me, is this also just like the biggest human evolution we're going to go through based on the fact that, given this tech revolution we're in, like, the digital wave, like we've had other waves,
Yeah.
but this just
Yep.
feels like a bigger wave. It's like the tsunami versus like the
Yeah.
waves that we've had previously with the internet, with email, with the mobile phones, etc. Like,
Yeah.
when you say quantum leap, what do you mean by that?
I mean that if you look at the way that, okay, from our known history, the way that we look at history is very linear, right? The way that
Yeah.
we even measure time is in 12 steps, right? But if you actually look at different time and calendar systems, some had 13. And there's actually some really deep and meaningful symbolism to this. Okay. So in a 12 system, you have even numbers. which means that you can move in that linear way. If you brought in a 13 based time system, which comes from the Mayan, the like many other cultures that existed, in the past, they had a sort of 13 count time and calendar system. And the reason why it was 13 is because the 13th is a way to break out of a loop. The 12 is nice and
Hmm.
even and measurable, right? But it keeps going around in a circle, which
Yeah.
if you look at us, that's kind of how we live our lives, right? A mechanistic, repeatable loop. So the 13 is the breaker of the loop because it's the odd number. And you also look at how we've demonized 13 in some cultures, right? We look at 13 as unlucky,
Mm.
right? But if you think about it, say if you were somebody who wanted to keep everybody in order, I don't know whether the intentions are good or bad, but if you wanted to keep everybody in order, you would keep things even, straight, right? And that the time itself has literally been shaping us, right? And so we are literally entering into a system where AI has broken a lot of the economics, the way that we measure ourselves, so many of these things that it is forcing the 13 out. And so 13 means we go from a infinite loop to now a spiral, which allows us to have that quantum leap out.
So we're getting pushed out of the 13 system into a new system. Is that right? Or are
Well,
we being
out of the even 12 into
into
the
the
13.
yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
kind of yeah, sorry. So that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I'm like, hang on a second. So yeah, so I think about then 13 system, is that the nonlinear system? Is that
Yes.
yeah, because I'm all
Yes.
around nonlinear. And when we talk
Yeah.
about time, we've
Mhm.
got clock time, which was the 12 system, time and calendar, like where, clock on at 9, clock on at 5, like the way our productivity, all of that has been very time based. And
Yep.
what we're talking about here is it's subjective time. It's
Your own time.
pardon?
Your own time.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
Mhm.
right. And I learned a lot about that in when I was doing my neuroscience and flow science courses. And, like it's learning how to operate in that nonlinear subjective time, which is actually
Yes.
more beneficial for us. That gets us back to being more, protecting our human mind, protecting our like, allowing us
Yeah.
to flourish, thrive
Yeah.
versus like you say, being stuck in this
Loop.
hamster wheel, if you like. And
Yeah.
that's what the industrial revolution has ultimately created at the end of the
Yep.
day.
Yep.
I
Exactly.
love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Um, yeah. So there's, well, I guess, yeah. Well, you said you had a few questions, right? So were there
So,
any other
no,
follow ups on that?
the other one was and then I'll let you tell us a bit about your journey with your business, et cetera, as well. But the
No
other one
worries.
was for me was I loved your, I guess, articulation of the horse here because it's really
Mm,
interesting the way you talk about, the world and all the different like Eastern, Western, all of that. That, I've observed it too in terms of, this horse is coming in. It's just like fast pace, 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 pace. But
yeah.
actually, we can't keep up. And
No.
if we keep up, this is where our system is going to completely break down and we're going to see more and more burnout. We're going to see more people, quitting because they're just, they're exploding in terms of their, when you were talking before around that we're going to see more cognitive collapse.
Yeah.
And so I think part of like even what you're talking about with this quantum leap is having this ability to be able to I know because I'm into all the astrology is it's for me, it's about I'm a Leo, but so it's for me and the snake. I'm a fire snake. So
Me too.
mine oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So mine is about being grounded and
Mm,
going with it, but also knowing when to just surrender. And so like
mm,
classic example, last night I had a ton of work to do, but the
yeah.
night before I was doing it and my dog was crying and the house it was chaotic in here. And I just thought to myself last night, what's going to happen if I don't do it? Nothing.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I'm just not
Yep.
going to do it tonight. And
Exactly.
once upon a time, I would have just done it and kept going and going and going, but it didn't get me anywhere. So having that
Mm,
ability to be able to know that we can't keep up with this pace. It's
mm,
not just saying I'm not going to try. It's just more
yep.
knowing when to push, when to not. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I think that's that whole
100%.
non-linear approach. So I just wanted to recognize what you said there as well.
No, no, 100%. It's that whole analogy, obviously the Polynesian wayfinding stuff is from my ancestry. And so I often look at a lot of things in life through this lens of wayfinding. And if you think about how a river operates, and if you are on the river trying to, say, if there's what do you call it, rapids, right? And you're trying to ride it, if you just got off the river and stood on land and just watched everything too, that's you moving into the observer effect and seeing what's actually happening. I think a lot of people have been taken for a ride on this river that was artificially, well, not artificially, but created for somebody else, right? And people have felt like they've had to get in onto that river and ride it with everybody else or keep up and build, I don't know, better, faster boats or rafts or something, right? When not realizing that they can get off at any time, rest, and, you know, come back in at any point in time as well. Because the thing about nature is that nature has no time also, right? It will just keep on keeping on with or without us. And I think there is something there that was always there about us learning to align ourselves with natural forces versus against. And I think when you do start to revisit physics, and it's funny, I was never into chemistry or physics and those sort of things in school, but it's like as I've gotten older, I think my own curiosity has led me down back that path, to see how it's connected. And if we respect the fact that we are carbon based beings, then we have to be more aware, again, become conscious of what is being done to us versus what is actually truly for us. Because a lot of people live their lives on this loop, this script for themselves that when you take away those things that have been scripted for you and you ask a person, what is it you truly want, right? What do you think you're here to do? Most people don't know. And so it's easier to get distracted and busy yourself with stuff, doing versus being. And I think that is what we are being confronted with now with AI is that it is going to strip away all the things that we have outwardly seen as success. And it's going to force us to look at ourselves and be like, who am I without these things that I've measured myself by all this time? And
Sorry,
it's
I
very
just
confronting.
it's totally confronting, and then I turned away because I'm just looking at this little person over here who's true. My dog, he's laying up with his
Yeah.
legs in the air and his tail is going like this. And I'm like, oh, you must be really enjoying this conversation.
Love it.
But
Resonating.
no, it's so true about the being and doing. But so then tell me a little bit about then how you apply this in business, because you
Hmm.
must come across businesses that are just like, no, we're going to keep doing it the linear way because this is the
Yep.
way we've always done it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's still a lot of resistance to what we're talking about here, and almost like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's more, I'm noticing more the language is, we're seeing more of this language, but there's also still a quite a resistance to it in terms of, like you say, going back to ROI and hitting your numbers, and this is all woo woo.
Yeah.
How do you break through? How does
Mm.
your conscious, where am I? How does your, yeah, I was sorry, I
Yeah.
had it in front of me. Your conscious
Yeah.
state
No,
of
that's fine.
mind.
Hmm.
How does that break this down?
Yeah. So I think what's super fascinating is that I have already gone through my own burnout, right? And you and I both, we've been there. So we can talk from experience with this. And a lot of the time when I was hired, they'd hire me for one thing, but the reality of the work I was doing in the background was different. So I was applying stack thinking or stack design in each of these companies and entities that I work with, but I'd never had a name for it. I was operating intuitively, right? So say for example, I was working for this enterprise and they brought me in, they're in the fintech industry. They brought me in to oversee this new enterprise social network that they had just rolled out. But then they found out they realized that nobody was using this enterprise social network, right? They had checked all the boxes, done their due diligence beforehand, but still chose something that nobody wanted, right? And this kind of goes back to the behavior, right? How do you get through to people if there's already natural habits and behaviors that exist, right? And so what I realized, well, at least upon reflection, is that I have a way or a tendency to be able to use analogies of already existing behaviors to the new thing that a group is trying to implement, right? So at the time, this company, they were very much an email heavy culture, and their audience or their customers were already making the switch to messenger based communication, right? So we're talking about like mid 2010s, early to mid 2010s. At that time, Slack, I'm sure you're familiar with Slack or have heard of it, right?
Yeah, it triggers
Um, I,
me.
I,
It actually
yeah,
triggers me.
Exactly. And they've gone through some changes, right? Ever since they got acquired by Salesforce, right? And this is where culture also comes into play. But this company that I was working with, they essentially were in a transition period. So they were 30 years old, looking to reinvent themselves. They had already gotten to the corporate phase. And they're essentially wanting to embrace more of a startup, lean, agile culture, right? And so they didn't realize that their email oriented tool usage was actually reinforcing the behavior that they were trying to get out of. Okay. And this goes back to time. The tools you use is also influencing or reinforcing certain behaviors. Most of us are unconscious of this. And so this is kind of the seeds of conscious stack design. It's like I'm trying to help people become conscious technologists because we're using tech all the time anyways. And so I don't like extremes. So I'm not saying that, hey, because of all this speed that you just have to give up tech altogether. Some
No.
people will do that. And also same for the opposite. So for me, I'm like, well, how can essentially we start to become more conscious technologists? And my realization came from this example when I was working with corporate, whereby I was able to identify that the simple use of email as their primary communication was actually what was preventing them from aligning with their own customers and the
Mhm.
wider market. And so there are cycles that are constantly happening, right? Inside the company, inside teams, as an individual. And then as you get outside of the company, you got your target audience, the market, and then the world, right? And so I was looking at all these things and bringing it all together for a very practical thing, which was how can we help people adopt this new tool, or can we make a switch that would actually solve the problem that you wanted to solve with this tool that you brought in the first place. So I ended up getting them to switch the enterprise social network for Slack, which increased the speed, changed the culture, solved multiple problems at the same time. And it also set them up for when COVID hit. So this was actually a radical thing back then because I helped implement Slack into the company around 2016. That was one of Slack's first enterprise customers.
Yeah,
And
it
they
doesn't trigger
specifically,
me. I just think that, like, you have so many different, like, messaging channels. I think the one that triggers me the most is Teams because that reminds me of my
yeah,
days when I was, like, it was nonstop in burnout. But I
yeah,
think I love your view, your perspective and how you're educating people on this conscious technology. How does this technology ensure that it allows our culture to thrive, not just be wedded to more productivity, more time, more like
exactly.
another channel we have to use, and
Yeah.
that's what you're
And
talking about here,
exactly.
subtracting the tools that aren't helping,
Yep.
and instead bringing more optimization in, but doing it at a
Mm.
conscious level.
Correct. And this is the alignment and coherence part. See, like I would look at this and now I have the language for it, right? Back then I did it. But I would look at this as if you're not liking Slack, it's also, I would say you have a different stack profile.
Yeah.
So you have a stack profile, the team has a stack profile, the company has a stack profile, and they are all reflections of whoever you're looking at of their consciousness level. And this is related to the cognition side, right? So tools are a mirror of our cognition. We just
Oh,
don't realize it. The way that the tools you choose, the way that it is oriented, and how much you use of each in different contexts is all telling you something right in front of your face. And most people don't realize this. So this is why I created conscious stack design to bring that up first. And it's confronting at the beginning. Like as I've been, kind of spreading the word about this and going through the process with people, the most common pattern is when they first see the tools that they're using and how they're using it, it's very confronting, right? Because there's what you think you're doing versus what's actually happening. But that's part of the process. Because once you can get past that, you can then start to consciously design your stack. And then the simple, is to stabilize that stack and know that, hey, regardless of what tools come in, if you know what your core 9 tools are, whenever a new tool comes in, you can be the one to choose whether it replaces that slot in your 9 core tools. And I use a pyramid, right? Because there's some other science to this, but you just have a pyramid with 9 slots, and you choose the slots and what tools go into that slot, and you have one per
I love
slot.
that. Why 9? 9 core tools. What's with the 9?
So I can go in multiple directions, but I'll start with the more scientific. There's a law called Miller's Law. And Miller essentially realized that the human mind can actually only hold 7 items at a time consciously, plus or minus 2. So 9 is the max,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
5 might be more ideal for most people, but I have the 9 there because it allows you to have a mental model. So this is the thing, right? There are multiple mental models we all have, but this particular mental model is set up intentionally for what is coming. Because as tech comes in, people are already starting to, or as new AI driven tech comes in, people are already starting to see how tools are being operated by the AI. So you and I might not be individual tool users in the future or masters because AI will do it, but we have to then go into orchestration, right?
Yeah,
And if you want to be into orchestration, we we're talking about the horse, right? This is the equivalent of being able to ride multiple horses at the same time without falling off.
I love
All
it.
right.
So
Yeah.
cool. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm picturing myself riding all these horses and like going sometimes going, "Ah, I'm on this side here," like
Eh,
pull myself back up. Oh my gosh. I have so
mhm.
many more questions for you. I know that I have to be careful with time here. AI, okay? Like
Yeah.
there's just so many views on that. And you know, we're
Mm,
coming right back to no, actually for my first question. So we're coming out of an industrial revolution. What is this?
yeah.
What do you think this revolution is called? Like it constantly like blows my mind in terms of
Mm,
I was going through some stuff that I was researching a couple of years ago when I was in my real research phase, and I
yeah.
actually had industrial revolution dates, and then I had
Yeah.
2005, and I
Yeah.
actually called it the formless years at that point because we're in this
Mm,
shaping, reshape, like it's almost like it is. It's like it hasn't shaped itself fully yet. So what do you call
yeah.
this revolution? What is it? We can't call it the AI revolution, like, or is it?
Mm.
Like that doesn't feel very, you know.
Well, it's funny that people still refer to the Industrial Revolution, right? Which shows where our consciousness is at. Because
Mm,
I think we are way past the Industrial Revolution, but we still have the language lingering because we've already moved into the Silicon Age, right? Which
yeah,
was
you're right.
computing,
Yeah.
right? We had the information age, but people were still referring to the industrial age, right? And then you have to ask yourself why. And it goes to show how embedded it is inside of us to think in terms of industrialness. And for me personally, I am already looking at photonics. Photonics is related to photons, light. And there's actually in the Netherlands an area that is being called Photonic Valley. So in the US, everybody's looking at Silicon Valley, right? But in the Netherlands, since the 90s, there's been a photonic valley that has been silently growing. And the reason why I'm looking more at photonics is because if you look at the pace of innovation and what they're innovating on and with, it has more to do with photonics and light than many other things. And we, of course, in classical physics, we look at the speed of light as sort of the fastest we can go, but that has already been broken. There are things that they are creating that moves beyond the speed of light, right? It's just what is commercially available to us. So I look at if we are moving into photonics, right, then that means already we know that we can't keep up with the speed of light as carbon-based beings. So what does that mean? You start to look at nature again. How do plants interact with light?
Mm.
How does nature interact with light? And we kind of have to learn from nature again to be able to deal with this new wave of technologies. And that's why the mind, it's kind of interesting. It's essentially what AI is proving to us is that the mind has hit its capacity already for humans, right? For most. And so we have to move into a different type of intelligence, which is for some people, they call this woo, right? Or too soft, but it is moving into heart space,
Yes,
right?
totally. Yeah, you know,
Mhm.
I think did I mention to you pre-show that I'm terming it soulful, high flow, conscious leadership, and that's a
Yeah.
long, yeah, but it like purpose,
Mhm.
presence, you know, performance, people. It's all heart centered. It's
Yeah.
soulful. Like that's from
Yeah.
within. It's out. It's inside out versus outside in approach to everything. I couldn't agree more.
Exactly. And that's where, you were talking about how am I moving this into the business world, right? I think it's that my entire career was spent learning the language of business and tech so that you can speak to that logical, pure logical mind that exists in these fields. And so a lot of the things that we talk about, soul, heart, spirit, there's science to it.
Yeah.
It's just that, and so I consider myself a bridger in that sense, where I just, depending on who I'm talking to, I can move into the more scientific explanations for this stuff, or I can stay in the non-technical, non-scientific explanations because I know they both are true. It's just that people fight over the way that we communicate these things. And to me, I've always seen it as stupid, right? And we're saying the same stuff, right? But I think it's because my lived experience has been moving around to different cultures, right? Different countries.
Yeah.
You're forced to speak differently and realize that there's a truth underlying all of them.
Yeah, but it's also for me, they can work together. Like, this is what's
Hey,
so
of course.
crazy. It's like there's
Of
2
course.
we've got 2 forces, and for me, it's like they have to come together, and so it's our
They have
job
to.
to bring them together because that's
Yes.
whole I mean, that's on your LinkedIn it's interconnected, it's holistic.
Yes.
You know, like,
Yeah.
a human has biology, a business has a bio like, is like a human has a business has a living, breathing ecosystem, if you ask me, too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it has a heart. It has a body, it has everything that we have, it has a soul. It's just,
Yes.
and then there's all the other parts around it. It's
Exactly.
I think this is a new language that is going to take us forward as well. Like, I really do. Tell me a
Yeah.
couple of final questions for you. This
Sure.
whole piece around protecting the human mind, cognitive collapse, what do you think are the biggest what are you seeing as the biggest risks to us in terms of cognitive collapse? And then what are
Mhm.
you seeing as the 2 biggest opportunities to protect our human minds? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I think 1, don't be afraid to slow down. 2, learn to operate from your own time, because time is being changed in a way. Whether it's our perception of time or actual time, I don't know. But I mean, we can see it. There's a lot of chaos in the world right now, or a lot of perceived chaos. And I think it might be this way for a few more years, but that's okay. Because again, it's that whole thing of if you imagine all these fire horses running around, you can stand in terror at the sight of a horse on fire or multiple, or you can learn to ride it by keeping yourself stable, right? And so I think the cognitive collapse side is first becoming aware of this is why I started with this becoming aware of the tools that you have and how
Mhm,
you're using them,
mhm,
right? I provided a mental model, right? And a whole method of doing this, but I understand that can also add to cognitive overload,
mhm,
right? We call it a cognitive tax. But you have to essentially the answers are always within us,
mhm.
right?
I
And so it's
agree.
about going within, learning to trust yourself, trust your own wisdom. And I think we've gotten so used to trusting the advice of other people outside of us that we've forgotten how to learn to listen to ourselves. And so everything that is part of conscious stack design is really more of a Trojan horse to help you just reflect on yourself.
So cool. It's
Mirror.
so
Yeah.
interesting, isn't it? And I don't know, I am realizing it's taken me a long time, 48, to get there, but, like, the more you listen to yourself within, the more tapped in you become, and you talked about intuition earlier,
Yeah.
intuition and logic, but boy, you can spot things and you can prevent a lot of things when you are
Yeah.
tapped in and it's just that intuition kicks in and you almost can preempt something before it's about to happen, or you can go, hang on, that doesn't feel right, I need to look at that. Like, it can
Yeah.
guide you as a lot as well, and I think it can guide you in life, leadership, and or
Yeah.
business.
Agreed.
Coming right back to tech and,
Yeah.
in terms of this year versus last year, and, it just feels like it's so much faster. AI is like now agentic. It's more than agentics. It's everything. Last year it was like, I don't know, it was just, chat and, all of that and just prompting. And then this year it's beyond generative. It's like, like orchestration, all of that.
Yeah.
In terms of what do you think, in terms of your macro lens that you bring to AI, what do you think are the big macro?
Yeah. I think if I apply the same sort of conscious thinking, right? And even stack thinking, if you look at the US, I think the White House put out a tweet where they announced the formation of the Tech Corps. So, they had the Peace Corps before. And now there is a mandate for the Peace Corps to essentially spread
So
US
news us.
AI system to the world. And you just go and look at this, and it's like, how old school are we that now, you're needing to force almost like a religion, sending out your missionaries, right? To put US AI out to everybody. To me, I think sovereignty is going to become more and more of a focus for a lot of people
Mm.
because once you become aware, you realize how much you're being manipulated,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's multiple layers to that. But I think the first step for ourselves is to become individually sovereign, right? And to understand that if we want to move into this new world that we're moving into, we have to first become aware. And again, coming back to conscious stack design, it's you can start with the tools because the tools are actually the most dominant
Yeah.
influencer of our behavior today.
Yeah. So
And we
true.
we have become unconscious users of that. And so for AI, we're now seeing each nation has a stack. And when it comes to AI, there's a certain stack that they're trying to use as part of their geopolitics. And so if you look at right now, we have China versus the US.
Yeah.
And the Chinese, in my opinion, figured this out a long time before the US has, which is they have open source a lot of their models. So a lot of people are adopting it because it's just cheaper. They have the economics figured out. They've always been about sort of the hardware side infrastructure, right? And the US is trying to play catch up, and their entire software economics is collapsing because they've just been about extraction, right? Profit, extraction, and it's now kind of falling in on itself. And you might be wondering, well, how are they still hiring people? Debt. They've just been going into more and more debt because they cannot have profitable businesses, which kind of goes against capitalism itself, right? They've lost the morality part that Adam Smith spoke about when he invented capitalism. There is no morality in capitalism anymore. I'm actually a fan of capitalism, but the way Adam Smith originally wrote it, he said that morality, there's a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments that he had, and people forget that, right? But we have taken morality out. And so now we have the system that we have, and it was inevitable, right? You just
Yeah.
had to have a house of cards. I think we have to protect ourselves by being very conscious of which AI we're using because each of them have their own bias. And so I personally use three models at the same time. I have maybe two Western models and one Chinese model. And you can triangulate them and get an answer that is a mix of all three, at
Uh,
least.
Fascinating. I think I need to have a session with you
Sure.
just to get you to look at well, check.
Let's check.
Okay, let's do
Yeah.
a conscious stack design check in and see where I'm at with everything.
Let's do it.
It's so funny, like that these conversations. Funny is the wrong word, but
Yeah.
it's like you say, I'm thinking something and you go and say it. And I know I said two final questions, but again,
Mhm.
another observation. You just talked about
Sure.
the economy, and I think that is completely up for grabs at the moment. I remember talking to
Yes.
somebody in my early days of this podcast, and they talked about the love what if about the love economy, and I think what does the like economy look like going forward, this chasing just profit and whatever it takes mentality
Yeah.
that's shifting as well.
Yeah.
you know
Integration, as you said, right?
Integration, yeah, I think it's going to
Hmm.
be a really interesting time in terms
Yep.
of that. Final question.
No worries.
Faya, how did you come up with that name? Do you mention it at the
Yes.
start? It's a funny story.
Yeah. So fire actually is a Samoan word, and I found out about this through my mom. And when I looked up the definition or meaning, it fire means to span a divide like a bridge, right? But it can also mean fire, as in like a campfire within a village, right? And fire is also part of the word teacher for fire. And so that is the word for teacher. And all of those things have been part of my own life and career, which is wild to me, right? And the bridging part, though, has become more and more prominent. That a lot of what I have been doing in my career before I even set up the company and what I have found myself doing after the, registration of the business has been a lot of bridging work. And this is how it has now become, I guess, part of my own personal mission and philosophy, right? Is just to help bridge these divides. So as a digital wayfinder, I'm literally finding ways to bridge all these digital divides. And that's whether, regardless of what tech wave it is, each new tech wave that has come, I've been able to navigate them quite easily for myself. And then I end up helping others do the same, and I get paid to do that. And so now I think I'm at a point in my career where I'm ready to kind of teach people how I've been doing that. And that is how conscious stack design came into
I love
the
it.
world.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any other final words of wisdom to share, George? Like I generally ask, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience in terms of you've given us so much today, you've given me so much, and also reaffirmed a lot of things of, my own thinking. But is there anything else that you would
Hmm.
like to share?
Uh, well, I think maybe the words from my great grandfather, which in Tuvaluan means it will come. And the way that I phrase it these days is through patience and persistence, it will come. And I didn't realize how aligned that would be for the times we are living in. Because back maybe early 2010s or maybe late 2000s, I had this weird fascination with wolves, especially specifically the Arctic wolf. And they became sort of a teacher to me about how to deal with change with communities, with leadership, because there's even a lot of myths around wolf packs and wolf hierarchies and alpha males and all that sort of stuff, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of the video, How Wolves Change Rivers. Have you heard of this before? Okay, so I highly recommend you check it out after. But it's about what happened when wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone Park in the
Oh,
United
maybe I
States.
have. I haven't watched
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. Um, and essentially, when they did this, they were highlighting the play or importance of predator and prey, right? I think humans, we have a very negative association with that interplay, right? That relationship. But if you look at nature, wolves could be around their prey at any point in time. But a lot of predators, it's only when they go into hunting mode that all the prey know that they're in hunting mode. You see it with sharks, you see it with like bears, right? But outside of that, they all live quite
Mhm.
peacefully with each other. And so there's this weird relationship. But when they reintroduced the wolves, it changed the entire ecosystem because without the wolves, the bison and the deer just overgrazed and literally ate everything. And then that meant that no other wildlife would go into certain places. And as soon as they brought the wolves in, everything harmonized.
Yeah, right. There you go. I love it.
Yeah. So that is the why I mentioned that with the quote, through patience and persistence, it will come. Use the wolf as sort of that visual anchor for that saying, because essentially the wolf teaches us how to balance the individual with the collective,
I
the
love
needs
that.
of both.
Thank you, George. How do we find out more about conscious design? No, I've got it. I've
Yes.
got it.
We
Sorry, it's Friday afternoon. I'm
can
always
just say
like the
CSD.
CSD. How do we find out about CSD? How do we find out more about
Hmm.
fire? And how do we find out
Yeah.
more? You,
Yeah, sure. So if you just go to www.consciousstack.com, that's where you get more information. There is a free assessment or quiz that you can take, which you get sort of like your own stack profile. So I've mapped all of these
maybe
stack
I'll do
patterns and
that.
stuff. And there'll be an update to the site that will go out today too. And yeah, you'll be able to get sort of your baseline. And then from there, yeah, we'll chat if you want to go deeper into the actual stacks themselves. And then for FIA, you can go to FIA Corp. So that's FAICORP.com. And then my personal website is www.georgesiosi.com. So that's georgesiosi.com.
Amazing. Such an incredible conversation. I feel like I'm
I've
going to book
absolutely
you back
enjoyed it.
in for like the end of the year, and
Anytime.
we can reflect on the horse or the start of next year. I know another. Yeah, it's incredible. I love everything you're doing. It's so required. Thank you so much for your time today, George.
Thank you for
Wishing you
having
a
me.
wonderful day and a wonderful weekend also. Thank you, George.
Likewise. Thanks.
Take care.